True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to be talking about a few nuggets with Sebastian. Basically, as I promised a long time ago, I have been revisiting the case. Whenever a case is cold, which in the case of Sebastian, I believe we have a cold case. What does a cold case actually mean? A cold case does not mean the same as a closed case. Closed case means there's no investigation being done. It is no longer a priority. There's not an investigator or a special agent assigned. It is in closed case files, and the case is not being worked. I don't believe that's the case with Sebastian's case. And really quickly, if anybody doesn't know, Sebastian Rogers went missing. He was 15 years old at the time. He would have turned 16 in December of last year, going to be now 17 coming up this year. And he went missing out of his Hendersonville, Tennessee home on February 25th was the last time there was a third-party sign of true life in a restaurant with his mother. And the 26th in the morning when his mother, who's Katie Proudfoot, reported that he was missing. Chris and Katie Proudfoot are the mother and stepfather, and that is who Sebastian was living with, although he was getting ready to move in with his father, Seth Rogers. That is the really quick description of the case. I think many people might already know about it. We've covered it extensively here on this channel, and it's been covered extensively in the media, although that's pretty much gone cold, like the case has gone cold. So what is a cold case? A cold case is a case that is still open. There's still an assigned detective. It's still a priority. It's nothing that resources can't be diverted off if there is a lead. And I believe that anytime a lead comes in, anytime information comes in whatsoever, that lead is covered and worked. And I still believe the case of Sebastian Rogers is a priority for Sumner County. Sumner County has the lead venue and jurisdiction in this case. The FBI has no venue at this point in this case. It's a missing persons case. There's no connectivity in terms of crossing state lines that any information is out there regarding. And so a lot of people want the FBI involved. Seth wants the FBI involved. Many people, they've petitioned for the FBI to be involved. And I'm just here to tell you, as a matter of facts, that cannot happen. It really would not happen unless there was some sort of federal nexus established. In that case, it could be opened by an FBI agent, but we don't have that here. So it's not, a lot of people think, okay, we're at the county level right now, right? That's who has this case, is the county. They are being assisted by TBI, which is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. That's the state level. Then, of course, above that would be the federal level, the FBI. I do want to point out a statement that was recently made by the FBI just within the last few days, and I'm going to actually go over that and read that statement. We're all here today about Sebastian. You know, I can't believe we're still having the same discussions that we've had all this time, but we are. And I think it's important whenever you have a cold case, as I started, you have to go back and re-look at what evidence you have. So last time I spoke specifically about conducting sort of a cold case investigation, I went through what law enforcement had to say about this case, and we covered it point by point by point. That was a whole separate section. In this section, I want to talk about, first of all, what not law enforcement, but the FBI just released. It's sort of a summary of the case. And then I also want to go over clothing. The clothing that Sebastian Rogers was purportedly wearing. And we're going to keep it that brief. in these segments where I went over the dog. I did a whole section on the dog situation. I'm thinking about revisiting that because I think it's really important to understand how many dogs were out there and the fact that it was never a scent dog for Sebastian. That's really, in a nutshell, the determination of my review of the dogs. But I think it might be helpful to go over that again. I'm going to look into chat and see if you think that would be helpful, or no, the segment I did before is fine. But no matter what, I'm going to be dissecting each area. So the area we're going to dissect today is clothing of Sebastian Rogers. But I first want to go over this FBI statement. And I have to get my cheaters that flew off because I want to read this verbatim. So I want to go over, and there's a few specific parts that had me really concerned. Let me see here. That is not the one. This is the one. Does everybody see what's wrong with this? I'm sure y'all do. If you notice in the very first line from the FBI, and I'll read the statement specifically. On February 26, 2024, Katie Proudfit went to wake up her 14-year-old son for school. To her surprise, he was nowhere to be found. Now, I don't know about you all, and Twitter, X, social media is one thing, right? I mean, people write, they write loose, you know, they're watching a football game and on the timeouts, they do a tweet. At least that's what I do. You know, it's something that you want to pass on, important information, but this isn't information like I do for a report, or that is done when you're an FBI agent and you're doing a public announcement to be reached by millions for their view. You have to have everything correct when you do that. That's just my opinion. Is the FBI fallible? Yes. Do people make mistakes in the FBI? Yes. I have never, except for on this case, twice now, seen mistakes made by the FBI. The first mistake, which we called out months ago, and they actually ended up changing it, was that it was the date that Sebastian Rogers was last seen, because they put out information, the FBI and Sumner County and everybody, that he was last seen on the 26th. He was verified last seen on the 25th, not the 26th. In fact, Katie says she didn't see him that night after she put him to bed. So she didn't see him. She said she went to bed at about midnight, and she was on the phone with Chris Proudfoot, his stepfather, her husband, who was working in Memphis, that they were on the phone jabbering for 2 hours. So she didn't see him. But for literally over a year, that flyer was wrong. Finally, the FBI changed it. I still see it wrong all the time I go, unless they've changed it recently. The last time I did a live on this point, which is very irritating to me, I still, when I looked on TBIs and I looked on Sumner counties, they still had the wrong date. And it's just, I guess what's frustrating, and let me know in chat, but it's frustrating to me that a law enforcement entity, and I love the FBI. I bleed the FBI. I say that all the time. I bleed blue. The FBI was so good to me. 25 years. The people there were amazing. How is this happening that you can't even get the age of the child right in your first paragraph? Does no one care enough to just make sure you put out accurate detail? And the problem when you do this in something that's this important, as I said, this isn't like an Instagram thing or a TikTok, you know, this is the reputation of the FBI seen by millions of people, millions and millions and millions. And to think that we here in chat know this case better than the FBI and the law enforcement partners, because you see from this bulletin that I'm going to show you, it's very clear to me that a lot of the information that the FBI is saying is particularly from Sumner County and their other law enforcement partners, which makes sense, It should be. They're working together. Okay, I literally went on a rant for probably 3 minutes about this, but my jaw dropped. I'm not going to lie. I was reading, I didn't read long, and I couldn't believe that. So it was really, really disappointing. It goes on to say, Sebastian Wayne Drake Rogers had spent the previous day with his mother. True. The pair shopped at a department store, played video games at a bowling alley, had dinner at a local restaurant before heading home for the evening. So they put out some general things. We know all the specifics related to that, but they put out the generalities because, again, this is going to millions of people and many people who don't even know anything about this case. After returning to their home in Hendersonville, Katie and Sebastian prepared for bed, saying goodnight sometime between 9 and 10. Now, I thought this was interesting a bit because, I'd always heard 10. So now the window has been spread out 9 to 10. I'm just saying 10 was the time. I have heard from all these various times that there have been assertions made by Chris Proudfoot, by Katie Proudfoot, because at the end of the day, only two people know what time he went to bed, and that's Katie Proudfoot and Sebastian Rogers. Other than that, no one really knows. Maybe Chris Proudfoot. All right, moving on. Katie told us a little bit before 10 p.m. So now we know a little bit before 10 p.m. she heard a loud, and I'm going to quote this, a loud bang. Bang coming from Sebastian's room. Is this the first time anybody has heard this? I literally have never heard bang. I've heard thud. I've heard loud noise. I've heard so many descriptions. I have not heard a loud bang. Maybe some of you have. This literally from somebody who's followed the case from minute one, and I know many of you have followed this case from minute one. We're all on the same page, most of us here. And if you haven't and are just getting into this, there's so much out there, but I hopefully will summarize a lot today. And then with this succession of kind of doing our own cold case investigation here. But this is a quote. This is not something that a clerk who is writing this is regurgitating. This is in quotations. Okay. Katie told us a little bit before 10 p.m. she heard a loud bang coming from Sebastian's room. So she yelled out to ask him if he was okay, to which he responded, yes, he was. Okay. Very interesting to me because I swear I've heard 3 to 4 versions of this whole particular moment. I've heard thud, I've heard noise, now I've heard bang. I've heard she yelled, I've heard she asked, I've heard all these different versions. I heard he didn't answer, then I heard he did answer. Very early on, Chris Proudfoot makes the assertion of, yeah, he did answer. And in that answer he gave was, yes, ma'am. I've heard that he didn't say anything. But the FBI recounts, and I have to believe this is from an official report because they've got it in quotations. So I think this person who wrote up this account, and hopefully we can believe it after they said he was 14, but anyway, it's in quotes. She yelled out. So she wasn't close enough to say, hey, Sebastian. She yelled out in her own words. I think that's why it's in quote. And he responded that he was okay. This is from particularly Detective Brandon Carter. So Detective Carter, this would have been his report. The report goes on to say, she told him to go to bed because they had to be up early for school the next morning. Okay, makes sense. Katie called her husband, who was out of town in Southwest Tennessee for work, and the two of them spoke for nearly 2 hours, and she went to bed around midnight. So that's always what I've heard. Okay, I've always heard that. And I really want to dive into this bang, but I'll get through this and we'll go back to the bang versus thud versus noise, because I think this is important. I really do. I think it's important. The next morning was what became a massive search effort for Sebastian. Quote, Katie called her husband and told him that she couldn't find Sebastian, that he wasn't in his room or anywhere in the house. This again is according to Carter's report. Katie got into her car and drove around the neighborhood into Sebastian's school, which was less than a mile away from their house, searching for Sebastian before returning to home. I got to be honest. I every time I read these summations, I get more confused as to what the truth is. But we knew he was without shoes. Still waiting to hear about socks, because we've never heard about socks, only that he was quote unquote barefoot and didn't have shoes on. We've heard that. When I think of barefoot, I think of no socks as well. But for sure, no shoes. And again, this segment is going to get in a lot about clothing, so I don't want to digress too much. I'll stay with reading on about what the FBI is saying. Okay. During this time, her husband called the local emergency communications center to report Sebastian missing. Okay. Now, I want to say this about that, because a lot of people have made a lot about that, right? Because when you call into the local sheriff's office, you're not going to be recorded. You know, if you just call up and do a non-emergency line, you just literally call their office, you're not necessarily going to be recorded. It's not like 911 where everything you say, the timing, everything in the background, they have very good mics and everything is picked up. So a lot has been said about the fact, and it's a fact, that he did not call 911. I also find it interesting that she didn't call 911, to be honest with you. But I digress. I said we're going to stay on clothing today. But I just have to say that I will say this because I want to give both sides of the pancake. Sometimes in these rural areas, and I've experienced this personally, when you call 911, they will say, this isn't the right 911, and literally say, hold on, and transfer to the appropriate 911 authority in that particular area. That is a definite fact that can happen. So does it make more sense to sort of get right to the jurisdiction that you need to get to? Well, two things on that. I don't think that many people know that. Unless you've called 911 from a rural area and had that happen, you probably don't know that, because why would you? I always say you can't know something someone's never taught you. I'm going to look in chat really quick. How many people knew that you could get transferred, from one to the other? it's unusual. Let's just call it for what it is. So he calls in to the sheriff's office, essentially. And again, this is Chris Proudfoot. He's not even purportedly there. Why didn't Katie? It's literally 911 as you're driving off to school to look for him at 6 in the morning before school's even open. Okay, moving on. In the early days of the search, it seems Sebastian vanished without a trace. I find this whole writing interesting. Does anybody else find it interesting? It's like I feel like when I first read this that I wasn't reading an FBI bulletin how I was always taught to write. This isn't sing-songy. This isn't a story about Rapunzel. This is a story from the FBI about a missing child. In the early days of the search, it seems Sebastian vanished without a trace. I wouldn't have even written that. And this is, I don't know, guys. I will say things have changed. His birth date is wrong. And this sing-songy sort of telling this story just seems off to me, but whatever. This case was kind of a question mark, said FBI Nashville Special Agent Robert Barrett. Okay, so that's a quote. Now, finally, we've got a quote from the FBI because, again, what I'm noticing from a lot of this is that we're hearing the FBI regurgitate information from Sumner County and from Sumner County at this point. But where is their investigation being talked about here? So, and again, they don't have primary jurisdiction, but I am noticing that. Okay. So he goes on to say, Mom wakes up and he is just gone. There's a question mark and we've got to figure out what happened, in quotes. Then the narrative starts in again. That question mark only grew bigger as the search went on. Again, I'm being too critical probably. I think I got off on the wrong foot when I first read this, when they didn't even have his age right. And so maybe I just have too critical of an eye. But it's very odd to me. This is not normally how we do a release of information. It just isn't. We bullet point the facts and then it's ended. Anyway, I'll go on. Quote unquote, Sebastian did not take, this is really important, and I think I'm going to pull this one up. Sorry, I put 3 of these on here. Okay, is this the one? Yes. Sebastian, this is critical. Sebastian did not take any clothes. Okay, so he didn't take anything. He didn't take shoes. He didn't take money. He didn't take food. He didn't take his cell phone. This is according to Carter, again with Sumner County. Okay, he didn't take any of that. This is so critical, I think, even though it's what we've known, they're lining it out. They're also saying from the FBI, or per Carter, no money, no food. In other words, he wasn't going away for a long time. It would not seem. Okay. Then Carter goes on to say, his cell phone and cash were both lying on the dining room table where they had been the day before when he went to bed. So it seems like there's a routine here, but that normally when he is leaving the house, that he has a cell phone and he has cash, but they're both lying on the table. Okay. According to Katie, and this is all in quotes again, so I just want everybody to know, this isn't what an FBI agent is saying was said. This is what Carter is saying Katie said. According to Katie, there was a small yellow, and I have heard so many colors for this flashlight. Here, it says yellow. I had heard green, I even think I had heard purple at one point from somebody. Maybe that was just, it got so down the line, it got distorted. But specifically, yellow flashlight that she thinks was missing, but was the only thing that appeared to be gone from the house. Okay. So this is really important, I think, also. We don't know whether he took that flashlight. And I had Dale Lundberg, who was a detective for over a decade with the Dallas Police Department, strictly homicide. I mean, he was an officer and in robbery unit and a detective for many, many years. I think 40 years, I believe, in law enforcement. And he pointed out something really interesting that I wanted to, if you didn't get to watch that live with Dale Lundberg, he's just really good. We just went over some of the case points, and I just wanted to get his perspective on some of the case points coming in very cold and not coming in with any agenda or, seeing things through his eyes, not through the side of Proudfoot's, not through the side of Seth Rogers, but just from a detective. So if you have a chance, you might catch that. Dale is really great. He's been featured on The First 48 Hours many times. Really, we worked a homicide together. Just a really great guy. Anyway, I digress again. The point is that she thinks, and what Detective Lundberg said, which I found so interesting, is he keyed on that. He said, why would you focus on something like that? In other words, that he could have just had in a pocket, but that's something that you're saying for sure was missing. Could it have been in a pant pocket at the dad's house or something like that? He said that he thought that was very odd to bring up that little detail. But then really, when you look at it, in other words, this is how I take that. Did you say flashlight? So it showed that he had a flashlight in his hand when he left. Were you making up that detail, or is that detail truly a fact? And I found it interesting, the wording that basically she thinks. She's not sure, but she thinks. And I think that's really important. So as an example, if I looked in my son's room, who's the same age, exact same age, and I said, there's a particular thing that I know sometimes he fidgets with or holds, I would know if it was there or not. I really would. I would 1,000% know if an item that my son, the same age, holds was there or not. So just that whole thing, Mr. Detective Lundberg hit on the exact same thing that I also wondered about. I just thought it was odd. Okay. The first week in the search for Sebastian was a massive community and interagency effort between the Sumner County Sheriff's Office, TBI, Emergency Management, Hendersonville Police, Gallatin Police, Tennessee Highway Patrol, the FBI, Metro Police, Wilson County Sheriff's Office, Sumner EMS, Sumner County EMS Response. I think she mentions that one, Trice, and other agencies throughout Tennessee. She goes on, quote, the search consisted of about 4.5-mile radius around Sebastian's home. Now that, people, is a big radius. It's such a big radius, I would submit to you, to conduct a grid search in that radius is extremely, extremely difficult. But it goes on to say, and this is all in quotes, so the FBI isn't saying this. The FBI is pulling this from reports from Sumner County. There were roughly 2,000 searches equipped with an app tracking their movements. The searchers could also use the app to plot things on a map, and they observed while they were searching the total area they covered within the 4.5-mile radius was equivalent to 44,000 acres. So the reason that happens is because you're doing grids. So you're all basically lined up. You have particular grids that are lined out very strategically to make sure nothing is missed. And so that's why you can imagine the amount of manpower. So now it's not just one guy walking in this field. So they're counting all of this area that was covered by putting together each of the tracking that they did from these searchers. Okay. Further, in addition to ground searches, law enforcement employed every available resource at their disposal to help locate Sebastian. Fire departments, mounted patrols, so horses, we knew that, ATVs, search and rescue, canines, drones, helicopters, and even an airplane. And we knew that they did a great effort with this. During day 2 of the search, the Sumner County Sheriff Office reached out to the FBI for assistance and specific that could potentially find Sebastian, who was high functioning autism. Okay. So particularly they reached out to the Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. It's called our CARD team. It's funny. I was asked about that one time out of the blue, and I don't know if you've ever had a brain malfunction, but I had a brain malfunction that day and I could not spit out that acronym. But nevertheless, this is, and I want to explain CARD for those who don't understand this. So offices have, okay, you as an FBI agent, you have your responsibilities. It's like being in college. So you're going to school and you're studying all these subjects, and that's like an FBI agent with their caseload. That is their primary responsibility. You have what we call file reviews that are done with supervisors, where you have to sit down and you have to write down everything you did on that case within that file review period. And you have to write out what you plan to do, how the case is going, your projections on the case, and what you have done. And then that is evaluated, and then you're evaluated. So you're evaluated every year, you evaluated, and you're also evaluated on these file reviews, and you get ratings: outstanding, excellent, satisfactory, not satisfactory, poor, and fail, essentially. So obviously your goal is to always be out here at outstanding for a lot of reasons. You get recommendations for cash incentives. If that doesn't float your boat, which really doesn't float very many boats of FBI agents, but you do want to get that accolade of being recognized for having high performance, and you get these wonderful awards, and you're recognized, and you get special leadership responsibilities and case agent responsibilities on the most important cases. So just to let you know, everything is closely tracked. Why do I tell you this? And I'm digressing a little bit, but I just want to say the other parts of your job, you can have auxiliary duties. We call them collaborative duties. Collaborative duties is what it's called. You don't have to, but many people do. For instance, I had 3 collaborative duties. I was on the SWAT team. I was a FBI firearms instructor, and I was also a police LETS instructor, law enforcement training for street survival. So I taught people from all over the world in terms of tactics and how to stay safe, how to conduct arrests, how to conduct site surveys, investigations, leading up to a tactical situation. Okay, that was me. But some people wanted to join, as an example, the CARD team. And if you were on the CARD team, you were one of the people that would be deployed, hopefully within the first 24 hours is the best idea, but you're deployed to respond to a particular missing child situation. We had one person on CARD on one of my squads. His name was Andy. And Andy, we worked closely with Andy because obviously, first of all, I worked in a huge office, so we had a lot of missing children. In fact, in our division, we had the Amber who went missing was in my division, and who the famous Amber Alert is named after. So the bottom line is that is an auxiliary duty. So what happens is when the CARD team is called, when Sumner County reached out, by the way, clear on day 2, but when they reached out, that CARD team would have been deployed. And so the closest offices, which would have been Memphis and Knoxville and other offices that were close, they would send out a couple of agents that are CARD certified, that go through extra training on missing people, to report and to begin a missing persons type evaluation of the situation. Now, I think it is fabulous that they were called, and there's a lot of reasons that there's a delay in those types of things. He delayed. Day 2 is when he called. I do not know when they responded, because obviously, depending on when you call, those agents are doing who knows what. They have to get there. There's a time lapse. So unfortunately, in more of these cases, I wish they would conduct CARD earlier. To me, certainly within the first 24 hours, and get FBI agents who have so much specialty training in this area, and also have all the resources of the FBI, because we open what we call police cooperation cases. It's a very special designation where we're allowed to use case funds, case resources, analysts, and everything else to assist the locals on cases just like this. He says, quote, meaning Carter from Sumner County, I contacted our FBI child abduction rapid deployment team for initial consult, and then they brought in the FBI BAU unit to assist. So to be clear, it seems to me that they only consulted. So I gave you the general scenario that typically when they're contacted, they'll deploy. In this case, it's very important to note they did not deploy. They consulted, and they actually brought in the BAU. So the BAU is the department located in Quantico. And those agents, for the most part, when you are assigned to BAU, not for the most part, when you're assigned to BAU, you're basically, people call it profiling, but you're a behavioral analyst for the FBI. So you spend your time really studying like behaviors, like a Brian Koberger. They're going to take everything he said, everything he did, everything he wrote, everything about him, and get that all into a database and try to learn from it and compare it to all the other serial killers, so that they can make analysis of the behaviors of other possible killers to be, and they can help agents out in the field analyze who they might be looking for on particular cases, particularly unsolved cases. Okay. The BAU shared a statistic that 50% of autistic children are prone to wander. Okay. We knew that. They're called elopers. Remember last segment, I could not remember that word. They're called elopers. They don't say that in here. That's what I'm saying. So, but quote, the BAU shared a statistic that 50% of autistic children are prone to wander. They are also usually drawn to bodies of water, and 71% of fatal outcomes involving missing autistic children were the result of a drowning. And these are statistics that I think we often talk about. I think most of us know, but they let them know that. Why is that important? That's important because if that department doesn't already know this, the number one place you need to look when an autistic child goes missing, if you really think that they've left the home, is ponds and areas and bodies of water. Period. End of story. That it's just a fact. Drunk men and autistic children go to water. In addition, law enforcement searched almost every home in the neighborhood. Okay, I'm going to tell you why this bothered me. Because almost every home. What are you trying to say? Almost every home? That really bothered me. Every home should have been searched, period, end of story. If you can't get them for some reason to give you consent to come in, then you need to work on a search warrant. You need to work on gaining access to every home. Why? I want to draw your attention to the Michael Vaughn case that took place in Idaho, for those of you who might remember this case. This was a case of a 5-year-old who disappeared. And in that case, it turned out that actually a neighbor found that child and likely murdered that child. It would seem the Wandras are the ones law enforcement have sort of pinned on it. They, dug up their whole house with a backhoe, never could find the body. The husband flipped on the wife, and the wife was kind of a lot of mental issues. They're both locked up right now, but on totally independent charges. They've never been charged. Law enforcement is still trying to work to make that case. But my point is, you never know if you have to just scratch that off the list that no one in the neighborhood is involved. In the Michael Vaughn case, it came out so late, years later, as I recall, that, the lead with the Wandras, because one of them basically started blabbing. And just think if they would have done the proper job of making sure they searched every house. So it's critical. So this was something that really bothered me when I read almost every home. Video recordings from nearby homes and a dash camera in Katie's car. Okay, again, a lot of people wondered, was there a dash camera in Katie's car? Was that a rumor? We've all heard it. We've heard it, I believe, from Katie and various times throughout this case. Yes, just to confirm, Katie had a dash cam. So a lot of people had speculated that they never came home from the Texas Roadhouse, which I don't know why people speculated that, because I believe we see Sebastian Rogers emptying the trash can. And we knew about this dash cam video. So we need to put it to bed that they didn't make it back to the neighborhood, because they at least made it back to the neighborhood. Okay. So again, video recordings, the dashboard camera in Katie's car showed that Katie and Sebastian didn't leave the house after their return home from dinner, and that no other cars were seen coming or going from Katie's home during the evening and early morning hours and night or day Sebastian disappeared. Okay, so now, again, from law enforcement, very specifically, no one came in, no one went out, and Katie didn't go out other than when she left in the morning. That is what the FBI is saying in this, and they're crystal clear. Okay? So I'm going to read on. Well, no, I'm going to stop right there, because no matter what, we have an issue, right? So a couple of things. First of all, there were no streetlights at all in their neighborhood. And I've lived in a neighborhood like this. It's very interesting. It's all about light pollution. So they don't want any light pollution, so you can walk outside and see your beautiful stars. So because of this, there's no lights allowed. Where I lived, there were no lights allowed. You couldn't have floodlights. You couldn't have any lights on after dark. I mean, you could turn them on if you were expecting guests or something like that, but you're not allowed to leave them on in the night, because they want to enjoy the outdoors. That's typically the reason for no street lights, no light pollution. That's the deal, right? So this begs the question, was the lighting so bad that someone could have left, somebody could have came and taken Sebastian via foot to a car that's waiting? Sebastian could have gone to a car waiting. Somebody could have left that house with Sebastian to a car waiting. It's too dark. In fact, Chris Proudfoot said in an interview with Web Sleuths about a year ago, specifically pointed out that it was so dark that you couldn't see some of the officers, I guess, that were whatever conducting their investigation. That's how dark it was. So I find that very interesting that you could not see. And also we know the qualities of these cameras are not top notch, right? Ring camera isn't bad, but these cameras, and many of the systems were older. We've gone into that, although I might do a separate section on that. But they're not going to be the best quality. This was pitch black. And in fact, on the lights video, which we've talked about ad nauseum, and many creators have spent their whole platform dissecting that lights video, you couldn't see a thing from that camera other than when light came on screen. And that's when you could see something. Other than that, it looked pitch black. It looked pitch black, and you see a light go this way, a light go this way, whatever. But I'm going to reiterate really quick before we digress too much that those lights are not involved. I'm 1,000% convinced. I have very good information, excellent information, unrefutable information that indeed those lights are not involved. And indeed here, the FBI also goes on to back that up. Initially, I too looked at that video, and I even challenged everybody. I said, listen, look with your own eyes. Don't believe me, look with your own eyes. And it is extremely, extremely hard to go against the grain of what one's own eyes can see on that. But the issue is the distance, the angles, and it is not, unless you see the entirety of that video, can you actually see where that light is emanating from. But my real point here is to say it was so dark that it is obviously possible for Sebastian to have been taken off that property, for Sebastian to have left that property and not been seen initially. Of course, I'm going to say, but then you don't disappear. He would have showed up on other cameras, someplace else. He should have showed up by now. Okay, I'm going to continue with the FBI statement. Okay, we have followed through. Wait a minute, I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, yeah, I haven't. Quote, we have followed through on every tip that has come in, said Josh Savely, Special Agent in charge for the Criminal Investigative Division for TBI. So now TBI is being quoted. Some of those tips we continue to examine at a deeper level, but the vast majority we have cleared as being irrelevant or ended with no result. This is where I get back to the fact this is cold. It's not closed, it's cold. In other words, they don't have more tips to examine. They don't have it. It's done unless more comes in. Okay. Unfortunately. Again, he says specifically the vast majority we cleared as being irrelevant or ended with no results. The lack of answers in the search. Okay, this is back to this writing. The lack of answers in the search of Sebastian was pushed the community widely to share the story on online platforms, but law enforcement reminds the public to be wary of misinformation from unverified sources. Quote, Sebastian's disappearance has deeply affected our community, said Carter. That's again back to Sumner County. We understand the desire for the community to want answers and for us to explain every step of the investigation, but we can't release all the case details without risking the integrity of the investigation. Now, this is important, people. They're worried about releasing something that would cause problem with the investigation. I love to hear this because this tells me there's an investigation. In other words, if this were just a missing person, if they're just missing, you wouldn't have to worry about the integrity of your investigation. You wouldn't have to worry about maybe who your subjects are getting tipped. I just found that verbiage apropos. Okay, moving on. We ask that the community refocus on what matters most, and that's finding Sebastian. Staying united and supportive will help bring us closer to the answers that we're looking for. I do agree with that. I think it's very important that we as a community on this channel, on other channels, and you know, I do not, with this channel, one thing we are not about is bad-mouthing other creators. I wish that was shared because I swear, I think I get bad. Some people just literally do shows on me. It's hilarious. It's so ridiculous. Thank goodness I don't watch them, but I know it happens. People tell me about it. Nevertheless, what does that have to do with true crime? Anyway, I digress. Back to Sebastian Rogers, because that's what we do here. We actually talk about cases and about crime and about missing people and about homicides and try to see what we can do to advocate, to get the word out, to keep their faces and names out there, and to see what we can figure out. We figured a few things out, by the way, on many cases. One thing was Strava, back with Brian Koberger. But anyway, let me move on to this because I figure somebody will say, yeah, what's an example? Okay, he says, the lack of answers in the search for Sebastian has pushed widely to widely share the story on platforms. Okay, sorry. I need to get back to where I was. Apologies. Okay. We understand, this is Carter, we understand the desire for the community to want answers, but for us to explain every step of the investigation again, sorry, I repeated myself, would be risking the integrity of the investigation. We ask that the community refocus on what matters, which is Sebastian staying united and supportive. Promptly sharing tips and information with the Sumner County Sheriff Office, the DBI, the TBI, and the FBI is the best way to find Sebastian. Then they give their tip line number. Continue to share the missing persons flyer. Don't wait. This is from Eric Craddock, who now is the sheriff. Before, he was the person in charge of this case, and then he was elevated to sheriff when that sheriff retired. Sebastian was 5'5" tall and around 110 to 150 pounds when he was last seen. He has brown hair and brown eyes, and eyes that look hazel to brown. Let me get him back up on the screen. I'm sorry, I spent too long without the man of the hour on the screen. He would now be 16. So they did get that right. They said he's 16. He would now be 16. The FBI is offering a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to Sebastian. The Sumner County Sheriff's Office, FBI, are still working collaboratively, sharing tips and information. Okay, whoops. Wait 1 minute. They actually addressed rumors. I forgot to read that part. I'm going to go through it really quick because I want to get into clothing. Case rumors versus reality. 2 rumors in the search for Sebastian have been disproven. Number 1, the flashlight theory. A house down the street from Sebastian had a security video footage from the night of the disappearance. The camera, angled in a direction that happened to be facing Sebastian's backyard, captured 2 small moving lights. At first glance, the lights appeared to be right in Sebastian's yard, suggesting someone was lurking with 2 flashlights in a hand, a potential suspect, given Sebastian's disappearance that same night. However, law enforcement video further investigate, and they have disproven this theory. This is something I talked about. Oh no, it seems like it's been several months ago. The minute I found out and knew for sure, I brought that up to everybody. It's still so hard for us to really believe when we see that video, but when you see it in its totality, you can know that is true. The dark sky, the camera angle combined had distorted the security footage. When they examined the video in relation to the topography of the area, they found the lights were actually coming from a pair of truck headlights flickering through the trees from the street atop about 300 yards away. Law enforcement further investigated to confirm the flashlights were actually headlights. They've also created an overlay of the security footage in daylight with a topographic map, and in the daylight, it would have been clear that the lights were coming from the hill. Okay, so we just have to shut that down. That's just got to shut that down. That is no longer, that's no longer something that is viable as a clue. But again, and this is very important, the fact that Katie Proudfoot said he took this flashlight, which, by the way, I don't even think the flashlight worked. I think it was more of like a fidgety thing. But I just want to bring up the fact that it wasn't a flashlight. Okay, second rumor, and then I'm at the end of this, and we'll get on to the clothing. The second rumor is about green hoodie person. Okay, the person in the green hoodie. The video surfaced of Sebastian and Katie in the parking lot of the local restaurant they visited the night Sebastian disappeared. That's a Texas Roadhouse video. Most of us have seen it and gone over it. In the video, a person in a green hoodie briefly interacts with Katie, and that's true. Suspicion arose that in this short interaction, the person in the green hoodie was planning something with Katie related to the disappearance. Law enforcement spoke with the employee at the restaurant who confirmed this person in the green hoodie was a frequent customer and helped identify them. Law enforcement went to meet the person, the green hoodie person, who happened to be wearing the same green hoodie in the video and was confirmed not to be a suspect. So, you know, that's been shut down. I do have to say this, though. And this is something that, again, I'm just shocked. That green hoodie person should have been found. And here I am Monday morning quarterbacking, but this is just such an obvious point. Should have been found, should have been interviewed at the beginning of the investigation, not after at night investigates, releases that video, people see it, and then have all these questions. That should have been done early on. That's what I would have done as an investigator. Anybody that interacted or seemed suspicious in any way, watching them or anything at the Roadhouse, because that's what happens sometimes is people pick up a target or somebody they might want to nefariously do something with, or something that would have been prearranged with somebody else. You want to look for those types of interactions. So I will never understand how the green hoodie person and perhaps others in that restaurant, seemingly, at least according to the information I have from the restaurant owners, how in the world do you not conduct a totally thorough investigation there? Early on, I'm saying, early on. It took sleuths sort of getting under the skin and you know, raising these concerns that they had to go back and do that. Okay, so there's that. So let me move on. We're done with that. Let me move on quickly about the close. And I know, gosh, we've been an hour. I'm so sorry, everyone. I want to talk about, again, as looking at this case as a cold case, you go back and you relook at things. Okay, now I want to go back and relook at what was Sebastian Rogers wearing when he disappeared. Well, this is the interesting thing. We just saw it in what the FBI says, which again is regurgitation from the locals. I think it's, let me add it to the stage. It's the bang. I could have sworn I took out this. There it is, right here. Okay. So last seen on the 25th, Stafford Court, he was wearing, this is according to Katie, black sweatpants, black sweatshirt, a black square frame glasses. Okay, we're going to dissect this because this is really something. Okay, now this is what something about this. Let's just go with number one, black sweatshirt. That is not what Chris Proudfoot said. Chris Proudfoot was very, very clear that Sebastian Rogers was in a black shirt. Specifically, he says not like a sweatshirt, but like a long sleeve shirt. A black shirt, so not a sweatshirt like we see written here. And again, remember, for a long time that said February 26th. That said that forever. They finally got that squared away. A black shirt And this is the kicker for me. Well, there's a lot of kickers. He says, well, yeah, the black shirt had either Star Wars or, I want to make sure I get this right, Minecraft or Halloween on the front. Now, everyone in the audience, your son is missing. Your son with a very limited wardrobe. How do we know that? The parents have told us that. They've said he had a limited wardrobe because he was growing. We know he also had a limited wardrobe because Chris Proudfoot got angry one night that Sebastian Rogers wasn't properly cleaning his room, and he threw everything out. So he had a limited wardrobe from both of those facts we know. And we know both, those are facts that were stated. And you don't know which one is missing. You don't, well, it could have been this one, could have been that one. Come on. This is so important. This is what I take from it. I'm going to tell you what I take from it. From my experience interviewing people. When people say something like that, they don't know it because if they say it's the Minecraft one, but really the Minecraft one is there, then that's not going to float. If they say it's the Star Wars, if they say it's the Halloween, it's an issue because I'm not buying it. That's just me. I'm not buying the clothing issue. I'm not buying it. Now, could it be because he doesn't know, but he wanted to, meaning Chris Proudfoot, he doesn't know and Katie doesn't know, but they felt like they should know. And so they threw this out here and now they're stuck with it. Oh no, they told law enforcement. A black sweatshirt, that's what law enforcement says. Seems like it's a big misunderstanding. When you have a missing person, you really should know the last thing they were supposedly wearing, and we're going to get more to that. But then they say black sweatpants. Now, this is really interesting. They say black sweatpants here. What does everybody think of when you think of black sweatpants? I think of solid black sweatpants that are a similar material to a sweatshirt, which now we already know it's not really a sweatshirt if you're to believe Chris Proudfoot, which again, I told you I have all sorts of problems with how he explained the shirt. So Chris Proudfoot later says in great specificity that the sweatpants are actually like the Adidas sweatpants. You know, I've reported on that a lot. That why can't law enforcement put Adidas sweatpants? In other words, those are the ones that aren't with the sweatshirt material, but they're thinner and they're kind of silkier and they have those white stripes. This is what Chris Proudfoot, not the part about thinner, silkier, but he talks about the white stripes. I think we all know what they are or what he explains. That's not what you see here. Okay, I'm going to move on. Black square framed glasses. Oh, I think I have a picture of those. I'm going to put those up so everybody can see it. Okay, these are the ones. This was his last school photo, everyone. His last school photo. This is the photo I like to use. There's a lot of photos out there. I don't know what you guys think, but I tell you what, Sebastian Rogers looks different in every photo. And I know a lot of it is we have a lot of earlier photos and things like that, but man, doesn't he look different? But I think this is the best, cleanest photo of Sebastian. You know, it's the photo I think of when I think of him. And I think it's what we would be expecting him to look like. Okay. but I want to stick on the clothes. So right now, per law enforcement provided by Katie, we have a black sweatshirt, we have black sweatpants, we have glasses, and we have no shoes. This is what I noticed missing. And I don't think it's missing because law enforcement doesn't know it. I think it's missing because it hasn't been released. Was there a diaper on? Is there a diaper missing? Is there a recent diaper in the trash can? Diaper, we can call them whatever we want. I'm not trying to put anybody down, pull up, whatever we want to call them. We know Chris Proudfoot said, this is facts, this isn't conjecture, this is facts, that he made Sebastian wear pull-ups to school, pull-ups at home. I have always said this is a big part of this case for a lot of reasons. What did they say Sebastian had on in that regard? Okay. And now the big, to me, finale of the whole thing. It's 9 o'clock at night. Your son's going to bed. You say you don't see him. How did you know what he had on? And I'm going to take it one step beyond that. You come home from the Texas Roadhouse in one outfit and you're getting ready for bed and you change into a whole outfit. According to Chris Proudfoot, he's got on a long sleeve shirt with Minecraft or something on it. Sweatpants. According to Seth Rogers, he's made this crystal clear. Sebastian Rogers wore pajama bottoms and no shirt to bed. That's what he wore at his house every night. What kid goes to bed and changes into a new outfit? And I say outfit because, you know, this is when you're wearing around, right, your Minecraft shirt, your Star Wars shirt, are you wearing that to bed? Maybe. It's not what Seth Rogers, his father, says. Chris Proudfoot seems very confused about what shirts he does and doesn't have and what he wore and what he didn't wear. And you know, he summed it up with, listen, he disappeared in a shirt and it had something on it. That's his big finale statement, Chris Proudfoot, on what he disappeared in. And sweatpants, black sweatpants. I don't know. I can tell you my son doesn't go to bed after being out all day, going to a steakhouse and change into a whole nother outfit to go to bed. Actually, he dresses exactly like Sebastian Rogers. He puts on these, like those pajama bottoms. I don't even know if you want to, I guess they're kind of PJ bottoms. Got a gazillion of them. You know, they're loose fitting, comfortable, and he doesn't wear a shirt and he goes to bed. Nevertheless, here we are on the clothing description. So let me know what you think in chat. After I get off, I always look very closely at everything that you guys write. I find you guys have so much interesting things to say. And I really appreciate y'all in chat. I love the feedback you give, and I really like hearing your thoughts. I also want to say, I want to touch on this because behind the scenes, it's important to note that Dog the Bounty Hunter, his crew at night, I don't want to hear any negativity about what Dog the Bounty Hunter did 50 years ago. I don't want to hear any negativity about the effort that's being put in, because I can tell you it's being put in. And I would rather have people putting in this effort to take on clues that people don't want to report to law enforcement for whatever reason, but they have an outlet. And it's happening. Clues come in, nothing's panned out, but they're working at it. And they have a huge, you know, amount of money they've put up. I think it's like 200,000, something like that. And so I just want to say, I think it's really important that anybody and everybody, use your platforms, use your voice, spread the word. If you live in this area, put up his picture. There's no pictures up anymore. No one even really barely knows who Sebastian Rogers is, except in the true crime community. And even that's fading out, exactly when he disappeared, how old he is. Shoot, the FBI doesn't even know how old he is. So we got to keep his name, his age, what he looks like as best we can out there. Or there's no chance that, he's going to be discovered. This case just, it's a bad case. And there's a lot of facts that I find very interesting. We're going to keep dissecting it. That's my total about the close. Yes, I agree with, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the $4.99. Lisa says, don't forget the Amber Alert equals abduction. And, Amber Alerts are used in different states. I mean, Summer Wells still has an Amber Alert out on her. They're used in different states, like Michael Vaughn. We all went crazy because Michael Vaughn never had an Amber Alert. He deserved an Amber Alert more than anybody. And sure enough, he was abducted. I mean, it's just common sense. And it's literally ended up being this person. I remember her first name was Tina. And we all wrote her, all of us, everybody write Tina. She was this person sitting behind a desk that got to decide. Because believe me, the FBI, and I know this for a fact, as well as the local authorities, wanted an Amber Alert. But Tina with Idaho State Police, who's in charge of Amber Alerts, wouldn't issue one. That was a huge mistake in that case. Sumner County didn't make that mistake. They had a critical missing early on, or endangered missing, and they quickly changed that to an Amber Alert, which was great. He didn't walk off on his own. All right, I'm going to try not to make summaries. I'm just going to keep going through the cold case evaluation, and the close bothers me a lot. Also, what bothers me and will always bother me is the landfill search. I want to see that search warrant. Believe me, look right now, Liam King is missing. For those of you not following that case, and I've been on this, and then I had a interview before this, so I haven't looked at social media within the last couple hours, but Liam King, and he's autistic and nonverbal and went missing, but he was seen on cameras, you see. And, they're actually draining a pond. They said it's going to take 12 hours looking for him. But, another case, again, he was seen. One of the biggest issues, and by the way, they're not searching any landfills. The biggest problem with this case is that he was not seen on camera. And you had a totally dark, black type environment. Which could mean, I guess, one of two things. Anyway, I digress. I said we were just going to talk about closing the FBI issuance. Everybody, thanks for being here. Thank you for the mods that are here. You guys are amazing. And until next time, please keep Sebastian's name out there. May justice be served for Sebastian.